I saw this article that I think clicked for me where I think you summed up really nicely what is different about now. Because I think when AI first came onto the scene, there was all this promise of what it could do or what people expected it to do. For some, that was on one end of the spectrum of, hey, we can develop courses and resources faster and better, which is a little bit of where Synthesia plays, but is now moving into this area of experience more, which is what I want to talk about, all the way to, oh, these legacy players, these LMSs and LXPs are going to have these end-to-end experience coaching and platforms. And the quote that I saw, and just to refresh your memory, these are your words, which I find are fantastic. He said the AI era, and this is from the Sana Renaissance article, which I'll link to in the notes. But he said the AI era means L&D can finally put experience before content. We have an opportunity now to stop trying to do everything and focus instead on how the systems we create truly support people to learn effectively with context and connection at the heart. And there's so much that we can pull out from this. But the first place that I want to go to is, when you wrote that kind of, what were the experiences that you were coming from, whether good or bad, that kind of led you to this thought of what is actually different about now with AI?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that resonates profoundly with my experience, but also what I heard from others, which is when AI came around, which is not that long ago, we went all into how can we recreate or how can we use AI to create courses, to create content. And I think it's quite normal because that's also where we're mostly used to operate as L&D professionals. So using a new technology that can make the process more efficiently, it's natural, I would say. I hear a lot of blame about, oh, this is all that we can do. And I would blame, honestly, the L&Ds that stop there. Because just using AI to create more courses and more content, more information, it's definitely not the way to go because there's already so much out there. So I think this is the first layer that I thought of, just based again on my experiences. I went into doing that as well, and on what I hear from our peers. But then I think the other layer that's more important is that AI can finally automate and make more efficient so much of the manual and maybe a bit boring work that L&Ds were doing. So we have an opportunity to free up time to create more, not necessarily more, but maybe more qualitative experiences. And I think the word experiences is what I started resonating with the most, because I recently came about the experience design field, and I learned so much about the idea that, a learning program, it's not just about the content, and it's not even just about the interactions, but it's about the end-to-end experience that a learner has in order for them to reach their goals. So there's a lot of human centricity, a lot of user-centered design involved in the creation of an experience. So I think that AI can give us a tremendous opportunity, first to automate a lot of the manual work, secondly, to make more efficient some of the tasks that we're doing, and thirdly, allow us to have this space for more strategic, more experience-driven thinking.
To that point, I think that's what reminds me of kind of the end of the quote, which is putting more context and connection at heart. The way that to what you're saying, where L&D stops is saying, here's the information, here's this course, here's this knowledge that you're supposed to have, but it doesn't acknowledge anybody's prior experience. What is the work that they're trying to get done? And certainly there's no connection that goes on, human to human connection that goes on when you're taking an asynchronous course. I think this idea of human-centered design is also incredibly important, because if you look at, I think what you're alluding to, this old style of people in desks and lecture style, where you have the person at the front who has all of the information, the expert who's delivering it to the student. With that model, it's I think it's very reflective of how we educate today, where to put it bluntly, it's like shut up and click next to continue, or shut up and answer this quiz. But then when you go into the everyday work that's being done human to human, there's absolutely no connection. I'm curious, when you talk about this idea of being able to automate processes and make things more simple, I'm so curious because there's I think when I've spoken with L&D teams about the projects that they have, and maybe they're going back and they're unbundling some of the tasks that went into these projects as a means of uncovering good use cases. I'm curious, has anything kind of come to the forefront, or has anything are there good examples that maybe some teams have picked up that maybe other people should know?
Yeah, I have a lot of bad examples, to be honest. I can tell you what I've seen happening is that L&D teams acquire these very complex LMSs, and they end up using so little of all the workflows and all the features that an LMS can come up with. But I have heard not just one example, more examples of L&Ds that have done exactly what you've mentioned, looking at it not from a technology first point of view, but maybe from a process point of view, and starting by mapping the process of the repetitive tasks that they have been doing maybe for years, most likely. And it's again, I don't think we should start with technology. I think we should start with the process. And then throughout the process, the question is, and the question that they've been asking is, where can we automate? Do we already have the technology available to do so, or do we need to purchase something else? So yeah, I think that's the first way to go, because again, I see lots of L&Ds acquiring tools just because of pressure maybe, and not going through the first initial research process and first analysis process as thoroughly as they should to acquire the right kind of technology. So if they don't have an LMS, and this is something that I recommend to everyone, if you don't have an LMS or an LXP or whatever technology, learning technology you're using, and you want to acquire one, don't start by looking outside. I think that's the biggest yeah, I don't know. There are so many people talking about so many tools, so we end up looking outside instead of starting from the inside and starting from our learners' needs and our needs as a team, and then mapping that and using that as a filter to choose the right technology. Yeah, I talked a lot, but does anything make sense from what I
No,
said?
it does. It makes me think. So I think what it makes me think about is, on my side is, I mean, 3 years ago, I wasn't working at Synthesia. It was just, I worked in mostly L&D consulting, or those types of upskilling programs where it's coming from the outside in. But even when I was doing branded learning, shopping for an LMS, I would like to think that something as expensive as an LMS, I was looking through, went through this process of diagramming everything out, or looking at, unbundling tasks. But this is a process that I just didn't have before. And eventually my selection was based on, I guess, who marketed better, or or maybe even better is, or more realistically, is word of mouth.
Yeah.
Whereas I have my small team of other people. What are they using? And then comparing, okay, what I'm doing similar to what they're doing? They seem to be pretty happy about it. And that's kind of what informed my choices.
Yeah.
And at no point did I really step back and maybe even just take a day to say, okay, look at my tech stack. What, like, I might go through my tech stack and find that everything is still useful, but going through that process of reevaluating, is this still working for me based off of the problems that I'm trying to solve? I did not go through that. And so that's one thing that I'm thinking about. The other is now wearing a vendor hat and being an advisor for companies. I always acknowledge that maybe I've gone over to the dark side a bit, but the problems that I'm having is that teams who don't go through this process, or who aren't unbundling their work into projects and tasks, and reevaluating what they actually need. I can show them something like an AI avatar or AI video. They could get very excited. And then 9 months down the road, they aren't using it like they thought they would, or their imagination kind of ran wild. And I completely understand that sentiment. So to what you're saying, it's reevaluating everything and taking time to list that out. One thing I do want to go back to that you had mentioned, which I think is I think a big so what to what you were saying before about human-centric experiences, where if if your AI tools are going to allow you to shorten processes or work smarter and make time and mental space for yourself, that means you can focus much more on the more human approaches to learning and experiences. And I know I've heard you speak really about three approaches. Maybe this has evolved from this other interview I saw, but I've heard you speak about social learning, purposeful practice, and feedback opportunities for reflection. I'm curious, in these might seem obvious, but why are these so important? In particular, that social learning component.
Yeah, I just want to stop for a second here
Yeah.
because I realized to some of your earlier points about automation, and because I think it's so important, because I talk a lot about social learning and all of
Okay.
those
Yeah.
things that you said, but I still think that the reality of many L&D professionals is that they're sending calendar invites and they're sending reminders
Oh,
manually,
yeah.
and that is the reality. I do feel sometimes that I live in a bubble where everybody is talking about these higher level things, but yeah, again, I think 90% of L&Ds are still living in that manual work reality. So I think it's really important to just stay here for a second. And
Yeah.
also because you asked me for an example, and I do believe this particular company does this a certain way just because they are in the automation space. So I have read a lot about Zapier.
Yeah.
So they are a product that basically helps people, everyone, not just L&Ds, everyone automate their processes by linking different tools. And they use their talent enablement team. They use Zapier to automate their L&D processes. So everything that is about scheduling calendar invites or
Yeah.
scheduling reminders or sending all sorts of emails over email or on Slack, just because that's the tool of their choice. But they looked at the process and they identified some of these steps that they can automate. Again, for them it's using Zapier just because they are the company. But I think these are, you know you can see them as small tasks. As an L&D, looking at your day, you say, oh, but it only takes 5 minutes to send a
Yes.
calendar invite, or
Yeah.
it only takes 10 minutes to write this email and send it over. But compounded, you realize that you spend maybe 3-4 hours of your day doing these
Mm.
manual tasks that could be automated. It's not easy. That's definitely something true. The L&D industry, unfortunately, is not known for high technology adoption or for being those geeks that look into how things work.
Yes.
But I do think as an L&D team, you can partner with your IT support team or with your technology team and spend a bit of upfront time into how can we automate these processes. It's definitely gonna take, it can take a couple of weeks up to a couple of months to make sure
Yeah.
these processes are automated. But once they are, you live in this world where, okay, what do I do now? And that's when you
Mhm.
start asking questions about, again, social learning. How do we enable social learning? How do we support people in reflecting more, and so on? But I do think I want to acknowledge that
Yeah.
automation is not easy, but it can be so liberating further down the road.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
Sorry, no, let's get into that because I think to your point, I think it's very easy to get caught up in what comes next or the higher level concepts. As you were talking, the analogy, but you have to acknowledge what's happening in front of you first. And
Mhm.
I think the analogy that comes to mind is it's like redesigning your house, and your house, is completely cluttered. There's boxes everywhere. There's clothes on the floor because, you don't have a process for doing laundry. But then you just pull out a paint bucket and you start saying, I need a calmer space. So I'm going to paint the walls blue. But there's still clothes everywhere. There's pet hair on the floor because you don't have the right vacuum. So it's this idea of, yes, absolutely. Maybe this is where we spend the rest of our time. It's how do you, in order to make use of these new tools, whether that's AI or really any other tool, I think it's making sure that you've been able to document and
Mhm.
what your current state is. And now as I'm thinking about this, this has come up a lot for me recently in talking with teams about where they'd like to be. It's always first to before you get the ideal state, to make sure you map out the current state. And it sounds like, to what you're explaining, it's like death by a thousand paper cuts, where if you have to send out 15 personalized emails, you might think it's as simple as changing out "Hey Claire" for "Hey Jake" and then hitting send. But if you have to do that 30 times, that is a place where that makes sense to start. It reminds me of uh, this book that I read called "Designing Your Life," where
Mhm.
a big part of that, and it's a book that really helps you to apply a design process to all aspects of your life. But in one of the earlier chapters, was, before you come up with a 5-year plan, before you do all these things, you're asked to do a time audit, where it's,
Mhm.
you just spend across your day and you see what is the task that's being done, what is the energy that is this something that is energy giving or energy taking. And I think that's a very similar place to start. I'm curious, have you gone through this process yourself at all recently with any of the tools? I know you mentioned Zapier, but really you can do anything with Zapier. So have you gone through this process as well?
Yes, yes, we at Offbeat we use Zapier a lot, too
Uh,
much if you ask me. So anything that can be automated, again, from calendar invites, from sending emails, from sending Slack messages, anything that's repetitive, we either use Zapier or Make, former Integromat, to do so. So again, what I do feel, even myself, and even with AI, is that the onboarding in any of these technologies takes a while. So the question is, do you have the patience to learn how to use these tools properly so that your life is going to be easier later on? Or do you prefer just doing the same thing over and over again? And apart from Zapier, I'm a geek, so I identify as a geek. So it's very easy. It comes natural for me to just stay with these tools to understand them. But it wasn't the same with AI. And just to give you an example, something that I just recently realized. So I use, I hope I can mention again another brand. I use ChatGPT a lot. And I realized that I ask the same questions to ChatGPT, but just the use case is different. And I said, okay, I'm just writing the same message over and over again. Why don't I create a bot that has, it already has the criteria, and I will, like, my prompts would be simpler because it knows what I'm expecting. And I never did that. I just never had the patience to do that. But I think this is a use case. Again, it's about being onboarded in these new technologies. That takes a while, takes some patience, and it's not compatible, I think, with the way that the world is operating right now. Because I feel like it's always about output, about creating things fast, fast, and faster. And yeah, if you just stay with these technologies at first, it's going to take a while until you get to you being faster in creating things. So yeah, I think this is the example that comes to mind.
One thing as you're talking, I'm loving how this conversation started out as maybe going into experience and tools, and I think really shifted to what I think actually is important, which is AI is going to save you time. But
Mm-hmm.
what does that actually mean in the
Yeah.
context of the work that we do? And so much of what you're describing, it goes back into re-examining what it is that you're doing over and over and over again and figuring out, okay, now I have a tool that can help to automate this process, something that it would have taken maybe a vendor coming out with the right tool to make happen before. But now you realize, oh, these are all things that I'm able to work with. Is there and when you say you have these use cases and you're swapping out information, are you talking about custom GPTs, or are you talking about something else? Like, do you have a prompt library? What does that look like for you?
Yes, so I do have multiple prompt libraries, to be honest. There's so many of them that I go through for different purposes, for marketing purposes, for learning purposes. Again, for example, creating emails for our cohort-based programs, creating not just emails, but a journey of emails to onboard new learners, or what else, even for our events that we run recurrently. We do have a process, we do have some emails in there, we do have some automations in there. So yeah, again, it's a lot about or brainstorming. Even again, we're brainstorming. I am brainstorming a lot with ChatGPT, and even with my colleague, with Ioana, we're in a call and we're stuck, and the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, but let's ask ChatGPT as well to see what it comes up with. And I think that the difference between asking ChatGPT just out of nowhere and actually having a prompt library or having a custom GPT or anything like that is that the output is also affected, right? Because I don't always have the patience to write a proper output, that a proper prompt, sorry, that will
Mhm.
give me a qualitative output. So I get frustrated. But if you do have that library of prompts, or if you do have that custom GPT, I think you're making your life easier. But again, it's going back to having the patience to set up those things to be able to, to have the. At first, I would try to understand what am I building for? What is the recurrent task that I'm running? And then I would need to look for some first the process and then the criteria, like what would I need to input into ChatGPT for
Yeah,
me to get the better output. And then, to be honest, I've never built custom GPTs, so
yeah,
I would need to go in and learn how to do that. And,
yeah,
and I think now that I'm speaking out loud, I realize that there are so many blockers into adopting ChatGPT or any other AI tool, because first it's about your process and what you're asking for. Then it's about learning how to use the tool. And I'm not always good with this.
I, then I, I think from my understanding and from my conversations, this is exactly where L&D is,
Hmm.
where it's been a year and we've expected these, a big set of tools that will save us all
Hmm.
the time in the world, but the actual process of identifying the right thing, making sure that it's scoped to something that the tool can actually handle, finding the appropriate contextual information, knowing what the ideal output looks like. Because when I've used custom GPTs, even if it has a whole library of research papers and other frameworks to pull off of, there are times when it still hallucinates, where I have to have the wherewithal to say, hey, I'm scrapped for time. This got me 60% of the way there, but there is definitely some mistakes here. And in that way, it hasn't saved all the time that I had hypothesized that it would. But to your point, this is also how we figure these things out. And I think not everything has to go through ChatGPT. I think when we
Hmm.
talk about automation, there's
Yep.
a lot simpler AI that we can be using now to make our lives easier in the long run. And I think that is the starting place in the reality for a lot of people who are here. Maybe they're just discovering AI for the first time because of ChatGPT. So
Hmm.
maybe instead of looking for the huge high level thing that's going to save us all.
Yeah.
Back. I feel like it's a great takeaway. I
Um,
have, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, there's a difference, or at least that's how I see it. There's a bit of a difference between automations and other uses of AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, or whatever you're using, because so we're using again Zapier and Make for automations a
Yep.
lot,
Yes.
and on the other hand, I do have an expectation from Zapier and Make to give me the right outputs because that's
Mm-hmm.
how the technology runs.
Yes.
When it comes to ChatGPT, and I have to acknowledge Aki Frederick here because he's the one that embedded this mindset into me, is that you should not expect AI, generative AI, to work as any other technology that you've been using so far because it's conversational, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you would be working with an external consultant. Your external consultant will never come in with the right answer right from the start. You would always spend some time providing feedback so that they can design their second iteration. That's how, again, ChatGPT, Midjourney, or whatever, generative AI works. And that's my expectation. So I am less disappointed, to your point, when it hallucinates, when it says something that's way further than what I expected it to be. So again, my expectation is different than it is from Zapier and Make and any other automation tools that I want and I expect those to work just like, I work with Zoom. I press end this call,
Yep.
so I
Yep.
expect this call to end.
Yep.
That's the output that I know I'm gonna get.
Yeah. Yeah. Just adding on to that, I think the mindset, I don't, I wish I had the source from this, but the mindset and the skill that has stuck with me through the past 2 years is that we're so used to digital tools having a single purpose, or
Mm-hmm.
look at how a lot of people are using ChatGPT now. The mindset and the skill that they have embedded in their head that we need to unseat is this idea that it's ChatGPT or large language model tools are not about search and retrieval. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, they're about discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It's the word is embedded within the name of the tool itself, ChatGPT, where it's about iteration and process and prototyping. If we were to have a conversation where both of us said the right thing at the right time, this conversation, I think it'd be over in about 2 minutes. I would ask you a question, you would answer it succinctly, and then the conversation over. It'd be the shortest podcast ever. But the fact that it's about discussion and discussions change.
Mm-hmm.
uh, so as you go through, depending on what's most relevant or what the focus is, and we could give ChatGPT a little bit of grace.
Yep.
Lavinia, I just want to add with 3 questions to close us out. Just been asking guests these 3 rapid fire questions, and you could answer them with as much attention or focus as you think that they require. But I'll ask you the question, you give your response as much as you'd like, and then I'll ask you the next question. Does that sound okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. What tool is most useful in your life right now?
Zapier.
Okay. This is next question. What is something you have a strong hunch about, but not the data yet to prove?
Ooh, that's very interesting. Um, I have a hunch that the role of L&D will disperse into other types of roles. So we will keep our skills, but we will go into change management. We will go into experience design, more strongly on facilitation and other disciplines out there to actually make an impact into our organizations.
Can you explain that just a little bit more?
Yes.
Because this I think is such I think it's a part of an evolution that's been a long time coming for the reasons that we started out this episode. But is it, when you say this, do you mean that maybe the marketing team might have somebody who's in the knowledge and experience function, we'll call it that, or somebody who's in the data team who becomes the data skills professional. Is it something like that, or do you mean something else?
So I think it comes back to the conversation that we've just had. So if AI comes in and helps us L&Ds in automating and making more efficient most of the tasks that we've been doing, the question is, what is next for us? And again, keeping in mind the impact that we need to have in our organizations. And for me, this means, again, systems thinking, change management. It means culture design. It means disciplines that were considered maybe higher up and a step further than the very transactional way L&D has been doing
Mm.
things, with I will just put a training there and they will make it work somehow. Maybe they will acquire the skills or change their behaviors, maybe not. I think when you look into these higher level disciplines, the expectation is that it's gonna, well, take more time, but be more embedded into the way the organization operates. So I think that's where we will go further down the road. I don't think this is a very quick change, but I think it's gonna come. So instead of us again being L&D consultants, we might be change management consultants. So we will take a bit of the skills that we have now. We will need to acquire new skills, and with that that skill set, we will do something else or something more than we were doing. We've been doing up until now. So it's not it's a transformation of the L&D function. It's not necessarily we're not going to wipe down L&D. I don't think that's going to happen. I just think that we're going to take in higher level functions, disciplines, and I'm not talking about hierarchy necessarily, but just the depth of the work that we're doing.
I love that. I think something that doesn't get acknowledged enough, especially, is that facilitation skill, where yes, we can do content development and curriculum, and we can work in building better systems and processes. But as far as I know, no other function really has that type of internally people-facing role in facilitation.
Mhm.
And especially as we use AI to optimize different parts of our process, what are we going to need? What does that allow us to do more of, or what
Yeah.
does that create much more time and space for?
Yeah.
It's that people part of the experience. I really like that. That's nice.
Yeah.
Um, this last one, we didn't get so much to AI avatars and video today. That's a-okay, but I didn't want you to think that this question is coming out of nowhere. But I'm always looking for new ideas as I try and split myself into two people, my digital twin and the work that my digital twin can do, and what my human Kevin self is for. So I'm curious for you, what is one task you could have your digital twin take over in your life? And this could be personal, this could be professional, however you'd like. But what is one task you could have your digital twin take over in your life?
It's like, can it be anything? Like literally? Okay. I guess doing the dishes is one.
Okay, doing the dishes. Look, we said it's about all the repetitive tasks that you wish you could automate. Absolutely, we'll take it. Doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Cool. Lavinia, I love your answers. Thank you so much thank you so much for your time, and also all your incredibly thoughtful answers. I'm curious if folks want to get in touch with you and hear more of what you're about. There's some very obvious places that they could go, but could you tell us how to get in touch with you, and kind of where you'd like to point folks?
Yes, of course. So again, from the obvious list, LinkedIn is a space where I'm quite active, so we can connect over there, and I am more than happy to come have conversations asynchronously with the people that write to me. And then we do send at OffBeat. We do send a weekly newsletter every Sunday, and you can find it on our website, offbeat.works, and we can keep in touch in there as well.
Wonderful, and we'll be sure to link those in the show notes. Lavinia, anything else anything else on your mind, or anything else that you want to add or something else you had questions about?
Yeah, I'm actually so sorry that we didn't get into those, levels of social learning and
No,
reflection and so
people
on.
can find that.
But
There's plenty of places to find that. Yeah.
yeah, but I do think there are these conversations that we need to have more of in L&D, because it feels sometimes that we are overseeing the big challenging parts of our role and just talking about these trends and the nice things in L&D. So on one hand, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about that, but on the other hand, I'm really happy that we spoke a bit more at length about these things that are not easy.
These things that are not easy and actually, I think, reflect our actual lives that are
Yeah.
happening now versus aspirationally where we'd like to be with
Yeah.
what's happening in the world. So definitely appreciate the conversation there. Lavinia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
We
having
hope
me.
to have you on again in the future, but again, it was wonderful to have you.
Thank you.